Hey there, everybody. It is Carrie with No Days Adhesives, and I am here with you this evening to show you and tell you about No Days Mosaic Adhesive Mesh, rather, which is an alkali resistant fiberglass mesh that is coated with the No Days Mosaic Adhesive film. It basically makes it super easy to create a mosaic on mesh for installation either horizontally or vertically, indoor or outdoor, really quickly and easily. And I'm going to show you how. So this is a piece that I did earlier. We're going to start to finish this. First of all, I wanted to let you know, if you were unaware, if you go to the No Days Adhesives retail website and make a purchase, you will receive a sample pack, and the sample pack will vary. Generally, if you buy mosaic adhesives, I will give you mosaic samples, and if you buy fusing adhesives, I will give you fusing adhesive samples. If you are buying one or the other and you heard that there is the opportunity to get a free sample and you want to request which sample it is, you should leave a comment in the notes and I will do my best to fulfill your wishes. Anyway, on to the main event. I am going to start with, handily enough, one of the sample size pieces of the No Days Mosaic Adhesive Mesh that you might receive with your No Days order. After opening it, we've got our short little instruction page here. We've got the mosaic adhesive, the mosaic mesh right here that's coated with the heat set adhesive film, and we've got a release liner. You can use the release liner or parchment paper. The adhesive on this mesh will stick to anything but silicone. So if you are trying to build your mosaic and start heat setting it on a surface that is not protected by this silicone release liner or parchment paper, it will stick to that surface. So you want to be careful and you want to make sure that to prep, you've got it on this silicone release liner. Next thing that we need to do is figure out what our design is going to be. And I've got some pieces that I've kind of prepped in advance here. I want to cut a circle in the middle. This is a really quick and easy pattern that I picked up by following piece by piece their Facebook or Instagram page. It might have been the Facebook page. It might have been way back before Instagram was the thing. But Piece by Piece is an organization. It's a mosaic organization in LA that works with people that are disadvantaged and helps them to find a way to use mosaic as a healing art, but also as a way to make some money. So they teach them how to be artists and living artists and like artists with living wages, rather, even. Okay, so I've got my circle. Anyway, I found this pattern. They had a visiting artist that came and was working with their artists, and they made this beautiful collaborative piece. Everybody made a little piece that looked somewhat like this, and then they mounted it all together in a vase of flowers. It was gorgeous. But this is one of my favorite quick and easy go-tos because you just need a circle for the middle. And I think I was going to do blue first. So to get all these handy dandy little squares, I've taken a sheet of glass. I've got my glass cutter. I'm just going to cut a couple of strips and then break those off. There's one and there's two. And they don't need to be super straight. They just need to be about-ish. So just straight-ish. I'm going to go ahead and separate those off. And you can see that I've got some of them already started. I'm doing some skinny rectangles, it looks like, for the middle of this piece. But you can do some mini squares as well. This is a great exercise for working on, oh, I just lost the word, keystoning, sorry. For keystoning. So the idea behind keystoning is that as you're building a mosaic, if you need to turn a corner and you're using square pieces, as you turn this corner, let's see if we can get you a nice close-up view. As you turn this corner, you're going to end up with these little, like, hey, triangles. Like triangle gaps, right? There's a triangle gap if you're trying to make that tight curve. So keystoning is going to allow you to cut these pieces so that they fit together more nice, more evenly. really well. And that's a technique that you can look up and practice, but this is a great project for practicing that technique if you want to. If you don't want to, perfectly fine as well. What I find is that cutting skinny rectangles does a really great job of making those turns without it looking like anything should have been done differently. And if you're beginning out and just trying mosaics, you know, it's one of those things, the more you do, the better you get. So just start where you're at and create something. Just create. Don't make it perfection. You know, make something else, make something else. If it's your first project, set the bar really low, because then the second project turns out amazing and it just keeps getting better from there, right? So don't get too persnickety, and don't freeze to the point that you just don't make anything at all because you're worried that it's not going to be perfect. Make something that is beautiful and that gives you room to grow, that gives you room to express yourself, that lets you practice a skill that brings you happiness or enjoyment. That's really the point of this. You shouldn't be doing this to make every piece perfect. And in fact, what I'm going to let you know is that while I'm building these pieces, I seldom make sure that everything is right where it needs to be. That's one of the advantages of No Days Mosaic Adhesive. It's a heat set adhesive, so none of these pieces are really going to stick. It's not sticky right now. They're not going to stick until I heat them and heat the adhesive. And not only do I need to heat the adhesive, but I need to get the glass pieces so that they are too hot to touch, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And generally you can tell what that is because as you're heating the pieces, when you push down on them, the adhesive will start to melt and the pieces will kind of slide around a little bit. Now it looks like I could probably fit one more piece in here. And typically when I'm doing this, my preferred method of heating is actually using a griddle. I've got an old electric griddle that I picked up. Another thing that you can do is you can put this on a cookie sheet and put it in your oven. You want it to be a low temperature, 170 degrees is about enough. On my electric griddle, I just turn that puppy on and actually plug it in, and the warm setting is generally hot enough. If not, I'll kick it up just a notch. Or you can use a heat gun or heat embossing tool. You can go to the hardware store to get heat guns. You just need to make sure that it's not a hair dryer. A hair dryer doesn't get hot enough to melt the adhesive. It needs to get to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which is too hot to touch. And if it's too hot to touch, it's going to be too hot for your hair too. So no hair dryers, they don't work unless maybe it's from the 50s and they were industrial style, right? Heat guns. Some of the heat guns, the setting on low doesn't quite get hot enough because it's more of a paint drying tool. So just check any of the heat guns that you're purchasing to make sure that they get that hot. I'm going to turn this on, low. So sometimes you'll find that if you turn a heat gun on high, it'll push the pieces, the little teeny tiny pieces away, but not always. The heat embossing tools I tend to like more because the force of the air that comes out of it generally isn't as much as a heat gun. And so I'm just going to start heating this, and I think we'll take you to the side angle again here in a second so that you can really see what's going on. But you can see that I'm heating the pieces and I'm touching them with the tweezers just to make sure that everything is getting nice and warm. There we go. So when you're using a heat gun, you just want to make sure that nothing around you is going to be meltable. So no extra packaging, no phones. And see what I mean when I push down on these pieces? See how it kind of wiggles around like that? That's telling me that that piece is hot enough that is melted, the adhesive underneath it. So I can turn that heat gun off and I'm going to have a few minutes to move things around still. So I'm just going to make some little adjustments. This is the time for me to be persnickety if I choose to and get those pieces exactly where I want them. And then I just kind of push down on them a little bit. Okay. And now it's time to put another ring down. All right, so there's another row. I could heat set this if I wanted to. I'm not going to. I'm just going to go and put the next row of pieces down as well. This piece I'm just going to throw on the griddle this time, and then it's going to do its thing while I continue with another piece that I'm going to pretend like I had just pulled off the griddle, kind of cooking show style, right? So you can see how quickly and easy this goes. And these are little teeny tiny pieces. Now, where might you install these? Well, it's possible that you've got a mosaic mural that you're going to make a whole bunch of little pieces and parts for and then install all together. There are a lot of community murals that do that. I just finished with a large scale mural that I was working on with an elementary school in Omaha, Nebraska. They made little pieces on mesh, and we use the No Days Mosaic Mesh in the classroom because it's so easy to use and it's not messy at all. The alternatives to the No Days would be using like weld bond or a PVA glue and then really making sure that you leave enough room on the back of the tile and don't completely cover it so that you've got something for the thin set, which is what you're going to mount the mosaic with, has room to grab onto the tiles. Or you would be using thinset on the mesh if you didn't have the No Days. And thinset takes a little while to dry. It takes quite a while to dry. And so does the Elmer's. So the No Days adhesives dries up right away and lets you start the next stage of your process right away. If you need to take a piece off or make some changes, you can reheat it. It's kind of easy enough to peel it off if you need to. So you can just peel it off and then put it back in place and get it exactly where it needs to be. Or you can simply reheat it and reposition your tiles until they are where you want them to be. Back to where might you put this? Well, you might decide that you want to decorate the side of your building, a building that you own or that you have permission to decorate. And you could mount this on the outside of that building. You want to make sure that the walls are prepped properly. You don't want to mosaic on top of paint because then you're glued to paint, which does peel off of surfaces. So your mosaic could peel off of a surface at one point. It's best if it's a raw wall that's, if it's not completely smooth, that it has been smoothed out and filled in a little bit. All right. Another row done. It's looking pretty good. I like where everything is. And to finish that one out, I'm going to end up doing some more large blue tiles, but I'm going to call that good for now and move this over to my griddle. So I've got this really nice cake spatula that I picked up. Big cake spatula. It allows me to pick my project up and put it on the hot plate, which I have over there. Now I can just let that sit for a while and do its thing. After it comes off of the hot plate, it will look something like that. I need to let it cool down, so I need to gently move it off of the hot plate and put it on a surface where it can cool down before I do the next step. So it's nice and cool now. The next step for me is, since I'm mounting this as a circle alone, I'm going to go in here and just trim away the excess mesh. And now this is ready to install with thinset, which I have. Give you a close-up view of a couple of these pieces and see what's going to happen next. So here are a couple of pieces that I did earlier. These are going to get installed. This one's going to get installed outside, but since I want to show you how to install, and I'm not going outside to do it, I've got some Hydraband board here that I am going to install this piece on, so you guys can see how that happens. All right, there we are. I've got this piece. Now, if I was being really like persnickety about where everything was going to be placed, I could actually trace around this and make sure that only the certain parts of the wall where I'm going to put my mosaic, get the thin set. So you might want to tape that off, or you could trace around it and just make sure that your thin set's in that place. I'm not really going to worry about that too much. I'm just going to go ahead and put some thin set out here and scrape it and then attach it, right? I've got a lot of thin set. So if you're going to be installing outdoors, you need to make sure that the thin set that you're using, thin set's it's a proprietary word, I guess, in the US. It's mortar. It's a cement mortar mix. Thin set. It is going to need to be freeze resistant. So it can't be porous to soak up any water and then explode in the wintertime. So you just need to make sure that the bag states that it's going to be safe for exterior use, to what temperature it's rated, whether or not it's going to be rated for floor or the wall. You know, those are all going to be important considerations for you when you choose the thin set that you're going to use. And I have a bunch of other projects that I'm going to do too. So I've mixed up, or I've pulled out quite a bit of thin set, because I've got some other pieces that I'm going to get ready by putting some thin set on the back of them in advance of installing them. That's going to make installation a lot quicker and easier. All right, so I like to, okay, technically you're supposed to add the dry to the wet, but I never know exactly how much wet I'm going to need. So I just pick out about how much dry I think I'm going to need, and then I start mixing the wet into it. And let's see, you guys can see that pretty well. Initially, it's going to be kind of hydrophobic and push the water away, but after the water starts to soak in, it will start to be hydrophilic, and it will attract all those water molecules and come together. And we're kind of going for, well, it's kind of like, okay, so I don't know if you cook pasta, but it's kind of like where you're cooking pasta, you're getting all of this water in here, and then it's going to go through this slaking process. We want it to kind of be this nice dough, and we're going to let it slake, which means it's going to sit there and go through this chemical process where all of the molecular water gets soaked in to the thin set, and it gets a nice strong bond. Now, when you're doing this, you're going to be wearing a mask. I'm not, because I'm talking to you and I'm being really careful. All right, so we're getting there. Needs just a touch more water still. And then I'm going to stick my gloves on and then hopefully not have to touch too much besides just the thin set. Now, normally I'll mix this a little bit with the spatula, and then at a certain point I'll get in there with my hands and then just start to squeeze it in between my fists to make sure it's the perfect consistency and texture. Right, that's getting close. Just a touch more water. Oops, that might have been too much. That's looking pretty good. So the project that I was doing recently, the kids project, the mosaic mural, the collaborative mosaic mural project that we did together, as they were helping me install the border pieces in class, I made sure to check the bag, the side of the bag of the thin set, and I did actually read the ratios that were necessary, because in preparation between, going to each class, I just put the thin set in a Ziploc baggie, and I put, I think it was 3.6 little cups that I had. That the ratio was 3.6 to 1 water. And then I was able to just add 1 cup of water right between classes so I could get it all mixed, and then it would start to slake in between classes. And then we were able to use it right away. So there is a ratio on the side of the bag, but that's usually for mixing the whole bag together. But I did kind of cut it down and was able to go by the ratio on that too. So you can guesstimate it, or you can go by the book, whatever you prefer. All right, time for the gloves and installation. Can you believe it's already time to install this? Hardly been on here. I don't even know how long, huh? Okay, so I'm gonna need to put my thin set down, and maybe we'll do this close up so you guys can see. All right, so here's my piece. We're gonna go ahead and put the thin set down there. I'm going to grab a spatula full and just kind of spread it on there a little bit. It's looking pretty circly. Okay, so now if I took this and pushed that into the thin set as is, you can see it is quite a bit thicker, or as thick as the glass. That means it's going to come up in between all those gaps. I mean, it'll spooge all the way up in between those gaps, and we don't want it to come up to the surface. So we're going to use the notched spreader here to create the proper height that we want here. So I'm going to come across here and just like that, scrape the extra stuff off over here, and then I'm just going to do that. And I think that's going to be good enough. Are you ready for this? So we take our piece in there and we kind of sit it in place, and then I kind of like to give it a little wiggle. That helps push it in. Push it into that thin set. That thin set is going to be spread all the way around the outside, or the all the way around on the underside of the glass, and it hasn't popped up to the surface, which is great because now when we grout, we can use whatever color grout we want without having to worry that there are going to be little bits of thin set popping up underneath it. Right? Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. The next step in doing this is letting the thin set cure and then grouting it. Now, if I were to grout this, well, if I were to put this on a wall and I had paint or whatever on the wall, I would have made sure that I taped this off so that the thin set only went where I wanted it to, right? So I didn't have this extra thin set that's now discoloring my surface. So that's one thing you'll want to do. After you install it and it's set up, you're going to want to have that tape on there for when you're grouting. You can come out a little bit with the tape because you want the grout to meet up to the, kind of want the grout to come up to the edges. And I'm not going to show you the grouting process tonight because the thin set needs to sit for a little while. If you can kind of do it at the same time, but you have to be really careful because you're adding more moisture to that. So it's best to kind of let that sit. I did say that I was going to pre-butter some of the pieces in preparation for installing them. And what I mean by that is instead of using a board or the surface, I'm going to use just a piece of parchment paper. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to spread this across, kind of like I did before with the other surface, except this time I'm using this temporary surface and putting my mosaic in there. Same thing. After it's set up, I can grout it, and I actually will pre-grout this too, because then when it's time to install, I will only have to put a little bit of thin set on the wall. Let's see. That may or may not work. May have taken off a little bit too much. We'll just kind of see. Push it in there. And then when that is all set up, I will be able to, I'll grout it, I'll pick it up, and then I'll be able to install it right on the wall. It's just that easy. So yeah, if you would like to try your hand at this, you can get the No Days Mosaic Mesh at several retailers. You can get it at the No Days retail store, which is linked in the comments there. You can also, you might also receive a little sample with a different purchase. So if you do, now you know what you can do with your sample. You can get it all ready to install somewhere where you have permission to install it. that does not deface something natural like a boulder. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic night, and we'll see you the next time.